Hello and welcome to the VandySports Podcast, part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee, joined by Billy Derrick and Luke Wyatt. Our podcast is presented by the Anchor Collective. And Billy, I'll let you tell us a little bit about that. Or excuse me, Anchor Impact.
Yes, Anchor Impact, Commodore Nation.
Which is the collective. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
We're off to a rousing start this morning.
Yes, no longer Anchor Impact Fun, but Anchor Impact, and because of that, in this partnership.
Hey, Billy, let's just start over.
Yeah, let's. No, we're good.
Okay.
Commodore Nation, you can get closer to Vanderbilt athletics than ever before with Anchor Impact, the official NIL collective for Vanderbilt University. You can gain access to unmatched exclusive coverage and be part of a one-of-a-kind community. As an Anchor Impact member, you gain exclusive privileges and benefits, offering deeper engagement with student athletes, coaches, staff, and the entire Vanderbilt community. Access behind-the-scenes content, exclusive events, unique merchandise, and personalized experiences, creating an unparalleled connection with the student-athlete's journey. You also become a catalyst for change, redefining the landscape of college athletics and showcasing the potential impact of NIL on student-athletes' lives. Join the mission of Anchor Impact to support student-athletes and elevate Vanderbilt athletics to new heights. Become a member today and be part of this impactful journey. Help the Commodores thrive and contribute now by logging on to Anchor Impact/register.
Basketball season, which we'll probably discuss some today. We got a lot of stuff to cover. Presented by the Wash House. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time for the things you truly enjoy? Let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of you with 2 convenient locations in the Nashville area. Just drop off your dirty laundry. Our professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, and that is your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh, clean laundry ready to be put away. Check them out at washhouseclean.com. Step in today. Get your time back. Our show also presented by the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Studio, presented by the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, a family-owned third-generation milk and ice cream distribution company located in Murfreesboro, a partnership that began over 50 years ago with Purity Dairy in Nashville to provide Purity milk and ice cream to consumers in Middle Tennessee. They now serve Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama, Chattanooga, and North Georgia. Today, they supply grocery stores, convenience stores, and others with Purity products, as well as Mayfield, Nestle, and Haagen-Dazs ice cream. For more information, visit their website at mpmci.com. Gentlemen, we got a lot to unpack. I've got a hard out at about 9 today, so I'm going to let you go beyond me, and I definitely want to get into the mailbag. But just a long week with the blowout at Tennessee, 2 basketball losses, transfer portal happenings. I don't even know where to start. Luke, I'll start with you. What's on your mind today?
Well, as I spoke about 4 weeks ago, the most important thing for Vanderbilt football right now is these next month and a half. The coaches' meetings, the AFCA here in Nashville, will determine. I know Clark will be interviewing people for possible position openings. And that week, I think that's December the 7th through the 10th. So I don't think you'll hear a whole lot until then, and some stuff after signing day. This is a whole process. Right now, most football coaches, unless you're going to a bowl, are doing what we call exit interviews with players and season-ending interviews. And I think that's where Clark is right now, seeing like 10 to 12 kids per day, working 10 or 12 hours doing that. Just letting kids know where they stand. If you want them to come back, if you let them know, hey, you can come back, but you're probably not going to play. All of that's going on right now. So everyone has to be patient with the other things. Of course, with Coach Horrigan gone in strength and conditioning, he has at least 5 people that he's looking at as a head strength coach. So that'll take time to sort through that as well. Some of those coaches may be involved in bowls and so forth. So you have to be patient as a fan, but this is the most important time for Vanderbilt, and probably its history because of the landscape of college football.
Billy.
Yeah, it's important, Chris, and I said that with Joey yesterday. For every team around the country. I mean, this is the same thing is happening, and it's been happening all season, right? They call it the pre-portaling, right? Where, I mean, this is an all year round type thing. But now this is the period this month and then into January. I mean, it's the Wild West, and it's ridiculous. And so coaches have to deal with that. Every coach does, right? So there's no sense in complaining about it. You got to attack it in the best way you can, because there's players everywhere. Vanderbilt picked up one yesterday or last night, actually, MTSU edge rusher, Zaylin Wood, obviously a solid pickup, but it's guys like that Vanderbilt will go after. But also, I think, and Joey and I talked about this, to help change some of the fan perception. I think getting some splash pickups with some proven guys will help this program right now. And Clark has talked about his excitement for this offseason, right? As bad as the season went, this is the hope right here. This period, this 2-month period of picking guys up, coaches coming in, coaches coming out, players, all this movement. Yeah, it's a lot to deal with as a head coach, but I think it's an exciting time for fans. Because Chris, it's about looking to the future, right? Nothing. The games are over with for Vanderbilt, but anytime you get a kid, right, you can picture maybe a Zaylin Wood getting a sack, and so certain things, like as a fan perspective, you can kind of envision that when you get a kid like that. Obviously, you got to wait till he gets on the field, but it's an encouraging time for a lot of teams. But I think for Vanderbilt, as Luke said, they've got to be very strategic, and this is tense times for every program, right? And it's almost even more challenging, Chris, if you're still playing, right? Yeah. And it's almost like Vanderbilt has, in a weird way, a little bit of a leg up on some teams that might still be playing right now. And every other SEC school, or not every other, but most every other SEC school is, other than a couple of programs. So I think that's kind of a silver lining, if there is one, for Vanderbilt. Your season is over with, and you can kind of attack where you want.
Luke, I'm going to direct this to you. I don't even know how you go about being a college football coach these days with all the conversations and the challenges and the incentives for disloyalty, I guess is a good way to put it, for players and for coaches. I mean, it's crazy. The NCAA has done beyond a poor job in getting everything here, but here they are. You've got to adapt to the way things are. You don't have time to sit and stew. What is the path forward for Vanderbilt football that works? And I mean, it's got to include a pretty healthy NIL. There's just no way around it at this point.
Well, improvement has to, again, you have to, even though you hate to look back, you have to look at the history of Vanderbilt football and the Southeastern Conference and how it's evolved. It used to be you only played 6 conference games, and now it's up to adding Oklahoma and Texas. So it just keeps continually getting harder for a school like Vanderbilt. So I think from Vanderbilt's standpoint is, what do you envision as a fan? Do you think we should be a team that competes for championships, or a team that's wins between 5 and 7 games every year? Realistically, that's where I'm at. That's just an opinion. Sure, it'd be great to. So I think Vanderbilt's where they sit in the scheme of everything, they have to move forward with, okay, what Clark started out and was hoping to do, he realizes now he can't do. And that's just build with freshman classes. Very few. There's a realization that's hit him. It also hit Stackhouse in basketball. So I think as a fan, improvement, you have to look at the 100 years of Vanderbilt football. There's only been 2 consistent years, the 2 9-win seasons under James Franklin. That's an outlier, folks. You can say what you want to. The other 98 years, you've had a few bowls. I've been to the 9 bowls, just to show you the least. I've been to 7 of the 9 bowls they've been in their history. So, and I'm still alive. But
barely.
It's just they have a long road ahead no matter how good things go. And, we're going to have a thing where someone's going to lose. You're going to lose a player off this team, and everyone's going to say, well, that's it. It's over with. You can't look at it that way. We all know this. Vanderbilt's going to get cherry-picked. They're almost like a MAC team. Yeah. take the best players off the MAC team, like Tyler Steen was a perfect example. He was the first one to go to Alabama. That's the thing Vanderbilt has to fight. That's why I said this offseason is so important from an NIL standpoint.
Yeah.
Transfer portal, we've got to get more active, which I know we're going to be. So the money thing, I don't know. We're never going to have the money that Texas A&M has to do these type of things and retain players, but we have to be strategic in what we do and be surgical about it, because if we're not, then you're going to flip 60 guys every year.
I'm sorry. I don't buy that. The money part. I mean, you look at that campus, that they have money trees on that campus. I mean, I've seen them with my own eyes. Dollar bills fall out of the trees. Obviously that's a joke, but
I wish I'd go get some.
Well, this is what I do not understand. Okay. And you have a dorm that costs allegedly $1 billion that practically casts a shadow on the football stadium. What you need to win an NIL is a fraction of that. It should not be hard. If you could take the right people to lunch, and I get that you got a separation between the collective and university, but leaders have the ability to say, hey, this is where we need help. You could raise the money to compete with Georgia in NIL over lunch. I really believe that, if you got the right people to buy in.
I just disagree. I don't think there's enough people interested in athletics that do that.
Well, that's the bridge.
I wish that you were correct. I do, because let's just take John Ingram, for example.
My point is, if you can get them to give to other things, why can you not get them to give to athletics?
Again, because it's not important to them. It's just not.
Is that priorities on the other end that will never change, or is that lack of persuasive strategy?
Probably a little bit of both, Chris, but here's the issue. I have friends who have means and have a lot of money. I have a few friends, believe it or not, they have friends in low places. I'm the one in the low place, but they're millionaires. They could give a lot of money, but they're not going to do it when they feel like the administration put that money, they've been lied to so many times.
I feel like that's where everything is stuck. It's the trust factor.
It's like having two wheels in the ditch and you keep the accelerator trying to get out. And the only thing, Chris, that's going to help that, and sometimes it just happens, is to do what Tim Corbin did.
Yeah.
Separate yourself from all the noise, the ancillary stuff in Magoogan or over on campus, and do it your way. And if they won't let you do it your way, then let them fire you. And then you and coaches have to do this too, Chris. I remember just an example of Robbie Caldwell. The one year he was the head coach, there was things they gave him a buyout and said, we're going to give you this buyout, but only if you keep your mouth shut about something. So that kind of stuff going on, no one's ever going to come up and say exactly what needs to be done at Vanderbilt. But it's
and that happened to Turner too. I mean, Eric Gerson report, he got $1.6 million and he did not speak to anybody.
Yeah, you're right. And that's what happens. It's been going on for a long time, man.
Yeah.
Eddie Fogler probably in the 90s, and I know I'm going back now 30 years or so, but Eddie Fogler could have crushed that school.
Yes.
They did and didn't do. He didn't do it because he's a class guy, but it probably could have helped Vanderbilt if he would have. And I'm not blaming an individual. It's just the mindset of the
It's
play.
the culture. I keep trying to tell people it is the culture. It dates back 60, 70 years. And everybody over there just drinks the Kool-Aid like it's this big cult. Nobody has the guts to get out of it. The pressure to conform to all of it is immense. And that is why they remain stuck where they are. And they don't have the fortitude to bring somebody in from the outside to shake it up. I've had the conversations with the people that are at those levels, and I've heard it with my own ears.
You're correct. And I'm going to give a perfect example of that. If you come up on a car wreck today and there's someone laying on the ground in the street, you're going to have 100 looking at it, and then you're going to have one person go over there and help the individual. That's what it is. Everyone's standing around looking at each other. You going to help them? You going to go over there and help them? Who's going to go help them? That's what they don't have. They don't. There's not a care to factor.
Well, and I had this conversation with a very prominent former player this week, just at random. Not going to name him, not even going to name the sport, but if I name the name, most of you would know who this person is. And this person came to me just apoplectic about the state of things. It's a person that was a star in his sport, but he cares about the other ones too. And it just looked that I get all the time from being like, what are they going to do? How do they get out of this? And I just said to him, I still say that there needs to be a united voice of former athletes with some clout. And you got people, I think, but nobody has ever, I've been saying this for years. And then what the school did is the school created the Black and Gold Club about the time we started talking about it and saying, well, hey, we're going to do this over here. And there's a pretty big correlation between the people who are, willing to be the mouthpieces for the school and the people that got picked for those roles. And so the Will Purdue's of the world, it was a Will that I talked to, are just kind of still persona non grata over there. I know that's the case. That those are the ones that they don't want to be involved in things. That they don't want outside ideas. And so you got a mass of people like that are former athletes that are sitting there and they still care, but they don't know how to do anything about it. And they look around and they say, there's just not enough of us to make a difference. And everybody's stuck in that spot too. Well,
all you have to do is look at the football stadium and the basketball stadium and Memorial Gym.
Yeah.
You got a little over 4,500 season tickets are sold in basketball.
Yeah.
A little over 500. Okay. I remember we'd have 4,500 for the Presbyterian game that would show up, just in the middle of the night if no one was there, you'd go to a practice 450. No one cares. They don't. Tonight.
Hey, look, I've been in that gym when they draw five figures for Rice or somebody in the dead of winter.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
I mean, you can't draw that many of your own fans for Tennessee and Kentucky now. And sometimes I wonder, I'm not sitting there saying they're trying to run off all the fans, but when all that's left is the people that drink the Kool-Aid no matter what, and the people who care and want to change and have been rebuffed and had their doing, that's where they are.
One other thing, and I'll let you guys roll with something else. I feel like part of this is that both sports are in a ditch. Billy and I had a conversation yesterday, and he brought up a great question. He said, well, have you ever seen it any lower? And I said, well, with the two sports combined, no, I haven't. Now, football has been through these valleys a whole lot. But to have basketball sit alongside of it for a 7 to 10 year period, and even women's basketball up until this year, they're playing well, have been in that valley. All three of those sports, no. I've never seen it where for that long of a period of time that it's been in the ditch.
Well, and it's getting dangerous because fans are trying to look towards baseball. All of a sudden, there's some pressure on that baseball team that we haven't seen in a while this year. So, I mean, I thought I knew what you were going to say to that question, Luke. I think Chris, you'd probably agree with that the timing of that football season and this basketball season. I mean, and Luke, Chris, I asked you. You said your first year covering the basketball team went to a Sweet 16. Of course, football team struggled, but you had that basketball team at a Sweet 16. So you could kind of balance it out that way. There's just that's not there this year right now.
Billy, I think that's a good point. I think, and sorry, Luke, let me finish this thought. I think pre-panic is set in with baseball. It's like,
yes,
oh no, that's what we got left. And let's see, they haven't gotten out of the regional last year. They didn't get out of a regional the year before, didn't even host. One of those seasons was a losing record in the conference. Now, look, they also lost 4-1 run games.
Yes.
And also saw a lot of guys that pitched out of their mind the one fall game I was able to go to. And there's I was listening to D1 last week, and there was a couple of guys that seem to indicate when they do their preseason polls, they're going to pick Vandy as the champion. But you've got the doubt that's creeped in there, and people are going, man, if this, if the last couple of years are more indicative of what they were than say 19, 20, and 21, then what? And that's when, that's a whole different place.
I disagree wholeheartedly with that. I mean, they won the SEC tournament. They still want to, tournaments. You guys, Chris, you're a huge baseball fan.
Yeah.
You know how baseball is. Baseball just happens, man. Look what the Braves. Take the Atlanta Braves. They were the best team in baseball for 162 games. And then for a weekend, they stunk. So, this team is still good. They're still still recruit well. Baseball is an outlier. They set to the side. I don't have an issue with them. I'm not worried one bit about baseball.
For the record, I think that's where I'm not saying I'm not worried one bit. I'm a little uncertain. If you made me park, the bus in one place or another, I would fall more on the side of I think they can contend for a national title, but it's just the circumstances around everything. When people start to panic and lose trust, that's kind of the place everybody rests.
Well, and perception can be reality a lot of times, especially at Vanderbilt. And the perception right now is that Vanderbilt athletics is a joke. I mean, take baseball out, like you said, Luke. Baseball is not a joke, of course, but basketball and football right now, with two guys here, Luke and Chris, have covered this team for the program for a while. Luke's been in there for a while. I've said it's never been like this. Baseball, I think, can change a lot for fans, and it usually does every year, right? I mean, you get to baseball season and fans are finally excited about something again. So it can, and I'm with you, Luke. That's an outlier, but I do think there's a tiny bit of uncertainty, but of course we'll see. We can't fast forward quite yet. We got basketball. But Chris, we do have you want to get into these questions? We got several mailbag questions, and then we got some chat questions as well. But that is brought to you by Sutherland and Belk. As I get to that, Reed, family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt or in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call, 615-846-6200 to see what your rights are and if they can help. All right, we got a good one here in the chat here, and I'm going to get to the mailbag ones as well from the board. But Corey asks, why would the university invest so much money for stadium renovations and new football facilities, but then for the product to be so bad? Is it just optics at this point for the university? I think that's a good question. I mean, I'm certainly it can feel like that right now, but we've talked about this before, guys. And these football changes are what, Chris? 50 years too late? I mean, 25. Some at least some sort of change.
70.
I mean, this is the. Yeah, I mean,
if you want to go back to processes and how they, scholarships and stuff like that, it goes back to the 50s. And I think so there was a great post on our board this week about the culture around it. And that's where, and I like, the more I read it, like, I think you're right. I've always said I think it's a culture problem, that there are people that control the culture and refuse to let the culture change because it's a loss of power. But I think it's the culture that has infiltrated the school that is just so powerful. It just has a Vulcan mind grip hold on people over there that they just can't seem to get away from. Luke is really, I'm sorry I filibustered there. Luke is really the better person to answer the actual question, I think.
I'm sorry. Repeat the question. I got a little lost.
You're good. Why would the university invest so much money for stadium renovations and new football facilities, but then for the product to be so bad?
Well, I was told, first of all, that if they didn't improve the facilities, there was an actual they were going to be fined and stuff like that. So I'm talking about like visiting locker rooms. So they were called on the carpet on some of the facility things. Look, you're competing in the Southeastern Conference, but you've got facilities that are not any better than MTSU's. So, they had to change that. They'd have a choice, in other words. But unfortunately for Vanderbilt, and timing's everything, facilities aren't near as important as they used to be. Now it's how much money you give me. They don't care if they have to dress in a janitor's closet now. If you can give me money, I'll be fine. So that's, and Chris alluded to it earlier, where's the money for that? That's what matters now, is competing within. It's just like, and I hate to get off subject, but I have to say this while it's on my mind. I was looking at Mike Elko's contract, and then I know what Clark gets paid, and I know what his coach's pool money is. And it's 1 and it's 14. And it's going to be 16. So there you are. You get what you pay for. That's simple.
Chris shaking his head. No response.
I'm to the point where
that's kind of where you're at right now.
I haven't run out of things to say. It's that thing in my head that says, what do you say and what do you not say at this point?
Right. Yeah.
That switch toggles a few times every day.
It's just a lot bigger than the athletic department. It's the university.
It is, and that is the concern that people have. That the bottom line stuff hasn't changed, and you can say chancellor this and chancellor that, and there's one theory that the chancellor is kind of letting this go to let this way run its course and prove itself is not the way. I don't know if that's true. That sounds. I've heard so many explanations. Vanderbilt has just talked its way through everything for as long as I've done on this beat. And for the first probably half of it, I went along with it without any critical thought. After about a decade of it, I started to think, all right, I've seen some holes in this. I've seen some things that weren't followed through. And then they hit the reset button with Diermeyer and everything's going to be different this time. Guys, maybe it is. But they're 4 years into this, and it's wins and losses, and that's where they are. When in doubt, believe what's in front of you.
Yeah, and Derek Mason talked about that during the game on the SEC Network. He actually mentioned Vanderbilt's administration. He kind of slipped it in, and I don't know that. Yeah, I would have expected that, but. Okay, let's go to the mailbag here. VU Wars says, I'd love to get everyone's thoughts on the various factors that might influence hypothetical coordinator and other staff firing and hiring. Chris has mentioned things like involvement in recruiting the current class, and Luke has mentioned the coaches conference. Chris, you make a good point about the coaches that don't affect this current class. Brandon Horgan is one of those guys, of course, the strength and conditioning coach. I'm sure when they bring players on campus, they may meet him, but he's not influential in that process. And Joe and I talked about that as well. But Luke, that coaches conference, I think people are interested in that. And you told me about that yesterday. What importance does that hold? And how many coaches attend that?
A ton of coaches. For instance, what goes on at the AFCA besides a lot of drinking and a lot of BSing is these coaches get into rooms, they get into meeting rooms, and they interview coaches. That's why they all meet in one place. And they, if you're a bowl team, you're still going to be there because it happens, I think, December 7th through the 10th, unless your bowl is really early. I don't know what's the first bowl this year, guys. What date do we know offhand?
Oh man, I want to say
in a couple of weeks,
December 16th or 17th. That Saturday here in a couple of weeks.
Okay, so everybody pretty much can be there. The teams that are practicing for bowls, obviously their whole staff can't be, but there can always at least be an operations guy there. So just about every school is represented by. If you're like Vanderbilt, just about every coach will be over there. And you're interviewing. A lot of guys just looking at the future. Where will I be if say this doesn't work out and Clark's gone in 2 years? I got to look and say, okay, do I need to take a look at something here at Virginia or wherever it may be? And you do all the interviewing and stuff there. and it's a whole lot of happening going on there. It's almost like the Bilderberg group out in California.
Okay. OG706 has a good one here. Will Vanderbilt football ever have a winning season under the current NIL conditions? It's hard to envision right now, of course. I mean, you can basically talk yourself into saying no to a lot of these questions because of the state of the program right now. But I want to bring up Northwestern. Northwestern went 1-11 last year, and all felt lost, right? Verge of collapse, right? Huge scandal, whatever you want to call it, in the offseason. They pick up and go, Chris, what was it, 7-5 this year, 6-6? And with the interim, David Braun, and he got Big Ten Coach of the Year. That's a peer school right there. Credit to Northwestern. Man, I mean, give it up for them. That's a hell of a season after a 1-11 season last year. Why can't Vanderbilt do that? I mean, what's stopping Vanderbilt from doing that? I know they're in the SEC. I know they're behind everyone else. So is Northwestern, and they're in the Big Ten. Look at who's coming into the Big Ten. So, there's probably an easy argument for that. Vanderbilt is Vanderbilt. Northwestern has more recent success, you could argue. But at the end of the day, that's the same type of school as Vanderbilt. Northwestern has invested. You see that new stadium they've got coming out? It's going to be beautiful. Vanderbilt's investing too, but I think Northwestern put about $700 million. Vanderbilt put about $300 million. That's kind of, that's where everything's at right now. But Chris, I mean, it's easy to say no right now, but I bring up a school like a Northwestern, and I know it's tough because Vanderbilt hasn't been relevant like Northwestern has as of late. But I mean, that's the blueprint, man. I mean, and I know that the division they're in the Big Ten obviously is not the SEC East. That's probably a good excuse there. But I just don't think there's any more excuses right now for Vanderbilt, especially when you have a school like a Northwestern that pulls off a 6-6 season after going 1-11.
Look, for years until the whole system changed, the narrative was, among other things, how can you compete with all these teams? They're all cheating. They're all paying kids under the table. We're not going to do that. Okay, fine. I respect that. It's all legal now. I know Luke says that's not going to, but just play along with me. If you had the $20 million or so that Georgia allegedly has, why would kids not come there?
That's a good question.
Why not? I think it's fixable. I do. I mean, but
I agree.
You've got to have people bought in. And I know we partner, the collective is our title sponsor, but I've been saying that before this was even seeded. So my thought on it's never changed.
It's a good question. And right now there's a lot of good questions and not many answers. It feels like, around this program. Luke, I don't know if Northwestern and Vanderbilt, if you agree with that.
I'll give you a couple of things about Northwestern. We had, and I don't know if that's the same now. I've been gone for 5 years, but believe it or not, kids that got into Northwestern couldn't get into Vanderbilt. Now, tell me that's right. Tell me how that's right. If a kid can get into Northwestern, Chris, why can't he get into Vanderbilt? What would be the reason to have him have to wait? Northwestern's offered the kid. This is something that happened, okay, when I was there. He was accepted at Northwestern. He wanted to come to Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt was dragging their feet, letting them know if he could get in or not. Now, why would that be you worked in higher ed. Why would that be a situation?
Hey, who controls the situation? The school controls it.
There we go.
Not anybody on the outside. And here's the other. I get that people are having a hard time with the idea of NIL and paying players, and some have described it as gross. And I get, and then I think where I do think it is gross is this current situation exists where you've literally got kids playing for one team, negotiating with their rival while they're playing in one jersey. They're talking about play, and it puts everybody in a bad spot. And it's a terrible system, but it's a system you have right now. And nobody there are, I don't know how many dozens of administrators at Vanderbilt making seven figures. Nobody finds that gross. Who brings more revenue to the school? And I get that it doesn't always work that way. It's higher ed. You know, a professor of whatever may not bring revenue to the school, and yet he has to be present to exist for the school to carry out its mission. I get it, but I don't know, man. I just don't think people have shifted their thinking and come to grips with reality. And I think that's what happens when the culture is so ingrained at a place like Vanderbilt, where it is this moral high ground that if it's abandoned, you almost lose your identity. I just don't think you can look at it like that. You got to have some common sense and look around. What would a football program that wins do for this university? I think we all know the answer to that. So the next question is, what does it take? Okay, it's going to take a lot of money to get there. Okay, how do we do it? How do we convince people and get them to buy in? And by the way, none of this is directive to the guys that run the collective. I think they're good guys. I think they're doing a good job. We like them a lot. But it is that bigger picture buy-in that people have got to start shifting the thinking in. I mean, the best sports book I've ever read, I'm sorry to filibuster the podcast here, and I've got to go in about 10 minutes. You guys are welcome to carry on without me. But I would encourage everybody to read a book. Marvin Miller, who is a baseball agent, the Players Union, wrote a book. And it's one of the best sports books I've ever read in my life. And it was Marvin Miller took over the Players Union in the 60s. And was a liberal Democrat, and he would go through and look at this and say that this system is so screwed. Because what happens is the owners have the right to every year they have something called the reserve clause. That means, Billy, if I'm the owner of the Cincinnati Reds and you're my employee, I've got you under contract. I have the right to bring you back under contract next year.
Right.
Or I have the right to release you. Totally one-sided. And the reserve clause was this thing that allegedly held baseball up. And the minute the reserve clause is eliminated, baseball is going to fall apart. Owners are going to go broke, blah, blah, blah. Look at what baseball franchises sell for now compared to what they sold for in the 60s and 70s. Look at the revenue numbers for baseball. Shohei Ohtani is going to make $1 billion somewhere. And baseball is not going to be any worse off because of it.
Mm-hmm.
But players would fight Marvin Miller on this. Player reps would fight Marvin Miller on this. They'd say, you're crazy, you're about to ruin the game. And it took him a long time. He had a few people that got it. But, I mean, the people that stood to benefit from the system were fighting him on it because the owners had brainwashed the players into saying, if you guys do this, we're going to break baseball and nobody's going to have a job. How did that turn out? I would suggest anybody that's remotely interested in that topic, read that book. It's not a popular book. I found it by happenstance. And ever since I read that book, I cannot get that out of my mind because it is a lesson on economics. It is a lesson on being sheep in a system that makes no sense. It is a lesson in the power of what it takes to change people's minds and shift thinking. And I think if Vanderbilt ever had a revolution of thinking like that, we would not be having these podcasts one after another. It would look a lot different. But they just, for whatever reason, they cannot break out of it.
We got a couple of $5 super chats from Justin Holland here. Thanks, Justin. He asks, why can't we have nice things? Have the riches stopped giving to athletics after John Sr. passed away? It's like it's only Ingram giving right now. I don't know. I'm not as in tune with the Rich family. Chris and Luke, I know you guys definitely are. I'm not sure if the donor base has obviously changed as, you know, people grow old, whatever, things happen. From y'all's experience, though, has that dynamic kind of shifted at all, or does that question not really apply?
Well, the Rich family, first of all, John Rich probably saved Vanderbilt athletics at one time back in the early 80s. When McGugin was built in 1980, 79, somewhere in that area. I can't remember. But his family, and they're still involved. They still love Vanderbilt. His son played at Vanderbilt. And I have conversations from time to time with Tate and some of them. And basically, they just feel like Vanderbilt doesn't get it. And why do you keep pouring money down a black hole? Now, you have the John Ingram, and he has his friends. And then you have some folks in Texas, I won't mention their names because I don't think they'd want me to, that have given a lot of money and still give money to this day, a lot of money. But there's not a whole lot of them. There really isn't. And again, that's what the university has to find. They have to find, like Chris says, why can't we raise that money? There's not enough people interested.
Kind of a good counterpoint to that. Justin adds, all-around athletic success would make the non-academic people at Vanderbilt look smart, which hurts the academic people standing, eliminating leverage. I think that's a good point. And from the top, that's probably something Vanderbilt is scared of. If their university is known for athletics, they probably wouldn't be too thrilled, and that might be the problem here. That might be the root of the issue. I think that's a good point by Justin. Let's see here. We got another mailbag question. Let's get into the weeds of football here. Denver Door, assuming NIL funds are available, who are the 5 current players we must not lose this offseason? I think that's a really good question. I actually talked about this with a little bit with Joey yesterday. I would go, and not really in level of importance, but CJ Taylor, Langston Patterson, London Humphreys. Let's see here. And then after that, for me, those are the 3 guys. I guess you could throw Junior Sherrill in there. After that, I might just have those 4 guys that are must. Bryce Cowan is a guy. There's a lot of those young guys that I think you just can't afford to lose. And to the surprise of some people, maybe Will Sheppard, I don't think is on that list. I would, I expect Will Sheppard to likely transfer. Again, I don't know that. That's just me guesstimating here. But I think most people are aware of the guys that they have to keep. Chris and Luke, I don't know if y'all have any different players you want to throw in the bag there.
No,
I think – go ahead, Luke.
I don't. I think you're pretty accurate with those guys. Now, there's obviously some that the developmental kids, like you mentioned with Bryce Cowan, who's going to be an impact player, I think, next year. Obviously, those guys. But the guys that have proven that they can play at this level, the ones you mentioned are pretty much the ones I would think.
Chris, you in agreement there?
I mean, off the top of my head, I'm thinking Langston Patterson, London Humphreys, CJ Taylor, and Patterson and Humphreys in particular, because they got 3 more years to go. So, I mean,
yes.
CJ Taylor's got 1 year left?
Yes.
So, I mean, you want to, obviously you want to keep him around, but you lose one of those guys in particular, and you're not just losing for next year, you're losing him for 2 more. So,
yeah, I think you could throw a guy like Martell Hyde in there, kind of, more of a project type, but I mean, he could be a good player. I mean, Grayson Morgan, you throw in there, Leighton Nelson, certain O linemen in there as well. Ashmore, I think, is a guy that they'd like to keep. Gunnar Hansen. So I think there's guys that they know, if they lose that all of a sudden is a lot more work on their end. Let's see here. Chris, you want to take one more question and then leave it to Luke and I?
I will. And a reminder, this is also presented by the Maynard Nixon Government Contracts Group. They advise government contractors on all aspects of their needs with a proud focus on matching legal solutions to business needs. We really appreciate what they do. So give me one more. I've got to do a radio thing in 2 minutes. It's been a morning around here. So
okay.
Yeah, I'll take
quick.
one, and then I'll let you guys. You guys are welcome to finish up on your own without me.
Okay. Yeah, real quick. We haven't talked about this yet. Joey and I got to this, but Brennan Horgan, Go Doors 94. I thought Horgan was well regarded when he was hired. Were there specific areas we underperformed, and can we expect improvement with a new strength coach? Chris Clark talked about it almost every fall after every fall camp practice about the soft tissue injuries issues. that plays into this, I think. And the guys that were out in certain games this year hurt them a lot. So I think that's part of it. But Horgan was well regarded, Chris. But I think Clark had pointed to making changes, and I was a little surprised, but definitely not shocked by this move.
That one's a little complicated. I've heard different sides on it, and I don't really feel comfortable speaking to it at the moment without a little more research.
Yeah. Luke?
Yeah, I've got a lot to say about it. I think this is probably the biggest thing that you'll hear above transfers, above portal entries. And let me tell you why. The strength coach is the second most important person in that building for football. He has them 7 months out of the year. And you have to be, as a strength coach, you have to develop relationships with those kids. They have to love you. And when you have a guy leave, you're always going to have a certain percentage of the team that liked him, a certain percentage of the team that didn't. But what you have to have in a strength coach is basically 90% of those kids buy in and love him.
Right.
In my time at Vanderbilt, I saw probably 8 or 10 strength coaches. That was the second most important position in the building besides the head coach. If they don't buy in and don't want to run through a brick wall for that strength coach, then you got issues because like I said, they're with them more than the football coaches are.
Mm-hmm.
And that relationship with the strength coach, that's the most important thing that's come out, of course, obviously so far, but I think it's the most important one anyway. I think that's more important than coordinators is that strength coach. Because if you watch our football team, and I'm not blaming Brandon for all the errors and all the problems, but there was definitely the speed, the strength. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference. We see it. You can see it on film. I mean, you don't have to be too smart to see that. And I think that it's huge. This choice for Clark is probably going to tell his career whether he makes it or not.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Luke, and Joey and I touched on it a lot yesterday in that episode. We got another good question here from GoDoors94. With regard to the coordinators, were there specific things you guys didn't like about the offense this year, including the quarterback situation handling? Same question for defense. So we'll start with offense. And we've talked about this all year. Luke, for me, number one, there was almost no continuity at most positions other than receiver. I mean, you kind of knew what your receivers were going to give you, right? But it's hard when you don't have protection from the offensive line. It's hard when you don't really know, especially late in the season, who's going to go out there at quarterback. So continuity for me was the biggest thing. Chemistry. We came into this season talking a lot about the chemistry and just cohesion of this offensive unit through fall camp. Didn't really see much of that this year. You saw it in flashes. Heck, second play against Georgia, pretty good there, but you just didn't see it all come together. But look, we talked about this. For you, what issues are you looking to be fixed offensively that might prompt a move, especially in this offseason?
Well, I think there's a realization that we have to have a quarterback that can move, and today's college football, with all the athletes and pass rushers and blitzes and stuff that you have to protect against, you can't have a statue back there.
Right.
It doesn't matter how strong of our Army has or how good. I'll give you a perfect example. University of Tennessee with Joe Milton. They always talk about he can throw the ball 90 yards and this and that. We couldn't put pressure on him, and that's part of the reason why he was able to do so well against us. But when they play a team like a Georgia, or Alabama or whatever, and they can't protect him and he has to rush his throws, they're high and wide, they're low. Because even though he can move, he's still he's a big old boy back there, and he just kind of stood there a lot of times when he should have got out of pocket. So I think, number one, Vanderbilt has to have a mobile quarterback. I really do. I think that because, number one, your offensive line is not going to always be the best, and you're going to get superior athletes a lot of times on Saturday in the conference. So you got to have a mobile quarterback, number one. And number two, you have to have an identity. I didn't ever see an identity with us. Part of that was not part of that was all the turnovers that happened early in the year. You never got it on track. The wheels never got on track. That was part of it. But if you notice in a lot of our games in our first drives, for instance, the Georgia first drive, the Tennessee first drive, a lot of times those drives are scripted, and the kids are real comfortable.
Right.
Boom, boom. Here's what we're doing. Boom, boom, boom. And they haven't seen you yet, the other team. So being able to move fast, that's very important to this offense. And but I think the number one thing is a mobile quarterback,
An off-schedule guy, right? Where when things go wrong with the offensive line, and that they did a lot this year,
right.
Improvise. You got to get a guy that can create on the run. And, now AJ did that a little bit, just not to the degree that I think Vanderbilt needs. Ken did it a little bit, but those guys were not runners, right? I mean, they showed what they could do in the pocket, but not quite what Vanderbilt needs. Let's go defensively here, Luke. Obviously, there's a lot. I think coming into this year, we talked about it a lot. The pressure pressure with four was something that we thought they could improve at. Didn't really change from last year. It really didn't. And they would send simulated pressures, and a lot of times when they would send linebackers, it was just too slow developing, or they would easily get blocked, right? And all of a sudden you've got two linebackers on the line. You've got 6 guys there. You got 5 other guys left to guard the other receivers, and one-on-ones, the quarterback runs around. Rattler for South Carolina was a perfect example of that game. Same thing with Dart at Ole Miss, and Milton not as much because he's not as much of an improviser. But against those quarterbacks that are mobile and can move, you really saw that. Heck, even a little bit against Alabama A&M and even UNLV, especially UNLV too. But yeah, and then secondary, Luke, I just think I don't think the skill is there on the secondary. The skill is there at linebacker, but in the secondary and on the front seven, you got to get more horses there, I think. And once you get those guys, and you can get pressure with 4, because that's what the Franklin teams did a lot of, Luke. They were able to get pressure with 4 and get to the quarterback, and they were creative. Once Vanderbilt can do that, the defensive issues will change. But right now, for me, Luke, those are the main issues. I don't know if you saw anything else defensively this season.
Well, let's start and go top down from the secondary back. To me, the biggest problem with the secondary, everyone talks about not athletic and that type of thing. The eye discipline was the worst. It's the worst I've seen in a long time. Now, I know you don't coach. You obviously coach a kid to use his eyes. That's the most important thing. I saw it happen twice in the Tennessee game where the eye discipline cost them. Mm-hmm. And it's not knowing where the ball is. It's not. That's all it is to it. Now, is that the kid doesn't have the ability to do that? If he's coached or the message is not getting to the kid, there's a disconnect there with their eye discipline. It's poor. We said before the season started that the biggest concern was the corners, but we felt like there would be a better pass rush than there was. So we didn't get either one of them. So that explains a whole lot of why there was big splash plays against us. Right. We did okay against the run on first and second down, but our third down defense was horrid. And that has to do with scheme. It has to do with has to do with just making a play and getting off the field, having more C.J. Taylors out there, that type of thing.
I thought the injuries hurt too a little bit, Luke. It feels like kind of a weak excuse, but Derrick didn't look healthy all year. Jalen Mahoney was out against Kentucky, and they didn't help. And that's all. Soft tissue got him a little bit this year. Cough is getting me right now. Got a super chat from Justin Holland. Luke, how did you enjoy working with Steve Franks?
Steve Franks, Atlanta Marist High School is where he came from. Steve's a good fella. He, he actually, I ran into him at a Vandy baseball game. I guess it was last year or the year before. He had a kid that from his high school was pitching for Georgia, I think. I saw him. Okay. Good guy.
Okay, we'll try to wrap up here soon, Luke. Let's see here. Okay, this is a good question, right? We talk about movement with coaches, right? Coaches coming in, coaches coming out. why has nothing happened yet, Luke? Is that I think it's a good question on the board, right? You saw Brandon Horgan relieved of his duties. What is the holdup there? Is that a recruiting type thing? Is that an exit meeting type thing from your experience?
Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, right now you're addressing a lot of people already know whether they're going to be retained or not, but some of them don't. So, we're going to wait till recruiting's over and the AFCA, because you're kind of waiting to see who's available. When you're collecting all this data right now of, okay, for instance, I'm just saying the Indiana coaching staff got fired. So how many of them are being retained by the next coach? There's a whole lot of variables that go into that. So you don't want to make a knee-jerk reaction and say, okay, I know him, I want him here. You got to wait and let the smoke clear a little bit for a team like Vanderbilt. Now, the schools that have no questions about their money and how much they can pay their coordinators and all that, that's why you see those things happen fast, because they're unlimited. It's like, go get them. You don't have to negotiate and see how much money I can get. If you want him, you got him. For instance, when Mike Elko went to Texas A&M, I mean, maybe he's bringing his whole staff from Duke. I don't know. But if he has a coordinator that he wants at A&M that he couldn't afford at Duke, he knows he can get that at A&M, so he doesn't have to wait on it. So you have to kind of sit back and wait and be patient with it, because any changes that are forthcoming, staff-wise, coaching-wise, whatever it may be, will probably be still a ways off. There may be one or two pop up, but it's not going to be complete for a while.
Well, it didn't take long for the strength and conditioning coach and staff to be relieved. Sebastian comes in here. He chimes in. He said he believes it was a power statement by Clark to remove Horgan, and not an easy one for him by any means. Of course, it's never easy letting go of any coach. Right. Could Adam Smotherman be an option? Smotherman, Coach Smo, of course, beloved by everyone at Vanderbilt. And Luke, of course, you were there when he played, and of course he came back and coached, correct, at Vanderbilt for a little bit.
Right.
And now he's at Virginia now.
Correct. I can give you some names that should be on Clark's list. If it's not, he ought to be whipped. Jeff Madden. You're too young to remember Jeff. Jeff was at Texas, won the national championship with Mack Brown there. Jeff played offensive line for Vanderbilt on the 82 Hall of Fame Bowl team. He would crawl back to Nashville to be the head strength coach. Jeff Mad Dog Madden. That's one. Chuck Losey from Penn State played at Vanderbilt. He's the head guy at Penn State. Adam Smotherman, obviously, a terrific human being, great guy, great strength coach. John Sisk, who was at Vanderbilt with Bobby Johnson, he probably knows as much about strength and conditioning as anybody I've ever met. Those four names right there jump off the page at me. I'm excited about whoever it is. I think that Clark will make the right choice, but I think he's got some interviews. You want to get that. You want to get that one in place pretty quick, because you start with pretty soon. Now you've still got some guys that were on the wait staff that's here, but your heart's got to be in it, guys. If you know you're gone, it's a little tough to crawl out of bed and go to work and do what you're supposed to do. So that you got to get them in here quick.
Yeah, and you got to imagine, Luke, that can make a pretty big impact early on. With a lot of these changes happening, a strength coach can stop a lot of anxiety and concerns from players, right? Yeah. Maybe wake some players up, maybe reignite some guys. I mean, that, early, and before the spring even starts, right? Because you said they'll be getting in here in the winter, kind of some of those early workouts. So that I can infuse a lot of change early that this program needs. Clark knows that, and they need it right now. And whether it's Smo or Losey or and either of those two guys you mentioned, Losey with the mustache there. I mean, you've seen pictures of him when he was with Franklin. I don't know that he had that, but and even Coach Smo got two guys that have been at Vanderbilt and have succeeded. I think you can't go wrong with either of those guys. Luke, that kind of wraps up our question portion of this. Before we wrap it up, though, anything you want to leave fans with, anything you want to remind them of and kind of encourage them on and keep their hopes up.
Yeah, I mean, the football. Let's just say this now. Let's take football as a separate entity from basketball, okay, guys?
Right.
We have gone through a lot worse situations than we're in football. It may not seem like it because we lost 10 games in a You can't even remember when we won a game. But I went through, and Vanderbilt fans have been through that are as old as me or older, went through a longer lull than what we're in right now, believe it or not. In the late 70s, we didn't win a conference game for 5 years. We just won two. And those are, obviously, that's not acceptable. I'm not saying that at all, okay?
Right.
I'm not defending that. But what I'm saying is football is a tougher nut to crack than anything they've got over there, simply because of the numbers you have to turn it around. So the margin for error is always going to be small. And in my opinion, we need to try to be a 5 to 7 win football team. When we're able to do that, then I think everyone will be not necessarily satisfied, but a lot happier with football. The basketball situation, that has to be rectified this year. I don't care about Ken Palm. I don't care about injuries. I don't care about anything. This is year 5. We've been to the NIT, closed the season well for 2 straight years. It can't be that same scenario. It can't be.
No.
I just feel like that if you're a fan of basketball, come out tonight and hopefully we'll beat Boston College. I know they've got a great center in Quentin Post, but it's a big win, and I know we're a 2.5-point favorite. So there you go.
There you go. There you go. Luke, thanks for doing this today.
Thank you. You have a great day.
You too. For Luke, Wyatt, I'm Billy Derrick. Thanks all you guys for checking in, especially on the chat and the mailbag. And we will see you guys next time. Probably next episode, I would guess, would be next week. Joey and I will probably get something out after the game tonight. Go subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to VandySports.com if you haven't yet. And we'll see you guys next week with Luke and Chris. But thanks for checking in. You've been listening to another episode of the Vandy Sports Podcast.